This is my street in June 1944, Rockstone Road, Southampton. American soldiers came with their tanks and guns and camped on the doorstep. Of course, the children all loved it. It was like a picnic for them. Oh, look, that's my sister Flora getting the skipping going. So this is the way we lived in Rockstone Road in 1944. And then, 40 years later, it all happened again. Of course, it isn't quite the same. Even Rockstone Road has changed. It's now called Rockleigh Road. But we do have some Americans here today. And there's no shortage of nylons this time. Everywhere you look, there's a memory.
Well, give us some gun then.
Only this time, they're not real soldiers. They're not even real Americans.
You live local? You living here?
First aid.
Yeah? For broken hearts.
I still live in this street, and all this means a lot to me. David! That's my little nephew, David, getting to know the Yanks. My front room was spare, and I asked the officer in charge if any of the soldiers would care for the use of that. They were welcome, but he said on no account were they allowed inside. But they could use the loos, and we had no bathrooms at that time. But I didn't fancy them having a bath in front of my fire in a little tin bath. But the children have just as many memories as us old people. The little lass with the big bows is Anne Dyer.
Do you remember when this photograph was taken?
Yes, I do. We all had to get ready, didn't we?
Yeah, and it was very, very exciting for us because I don't think we'd had our photograph taken before. People didn't have materials for taking photographs, so it was quite a thrill. And I remember being very thrilled, and then Flo warning me as I got into the rope not to smile. I was 6, I'd lost my 2 front teeth, and it would show up, so there I am with my head down.
There's Tony Masters, the only one skipping. Do you remember Tony Masters?
Yes, I do. The cricket was for the boys and the skipping was for the girls, but that didn't suit Tony.
Well, Tony Masters grew up and went to Australia. But many of us stayed in the street, like my neighbour, Mrs. Nutland, at number 7.
40 years ago, just before D-Day, an American officer asked me to get up and clean my windows, and this is the photo.
And there's more memories across the road at number 8.
What I can remember, there was a group of us kids in the road, and this photographer came along and he said, "Would you like to play cricket?" And we all agreed yes. And this is me with my knickers hanging down. And don't I look a sight?
I was living in the street in 1944, and we used to, or at least I used to put them up in the shed and fix them up, and some of them used to sleep in the front garden. I always left the shed open so they could go in and out as they pleased. And when they were gone in the morning, you always found something on the bench there left for you, like a packet of cigarettes or something like that.
Most of the lads who are here today, dressed as soldiers, aren't old enough to remember the war, but they've done up their jeeps and tanks, and it's just the way I remember it.
No, I'm not an MP, I'm not an American either. But, I got involved in this battle reenactment. That led to military collecting, i.e. uniforms, etc. Involvement in 40s dances. I started, and I got my brother-in-law, sister's husband, involved. And my sister here said she would never get involved in it. You know, no way would she wear a uniform. And now she's a bigger poser than all of us put together. You know, she loves it.
Wow. Well, we do have some of the real army here today. They're cooking a stew from the menu the soldiers had in June 1944.
Well worth waiting 40 years.
And back in those days, I remember Janet Painter and Pauline Barnes as being a couple of little scamps.
Do you remember when the Americans came into the road? They used to shave their heads. be it voluntary or involuntary.
I remember them queuing up for haircuts because they were worried over lice, weren't they?
That's right, yeah.
And when they sat down, they never knew what they were going to get up with, and they
No,
would shave like
Mohicans
or
one
of the Union Jack on one of them, didn't they?
That's right, yes, they did. Yes.
Wasn't that yank there called Doughboy?
That's right.
Takes you back, doesn't it, looking at that?
Well, there's me on one end.
And there's me on the other, like 2 posts. I always remember them because they gave us gum, didn't they?
That's
I had a
right.
sister of 17 who was very pretty. My mother nearly kept her in under lock and key. We used to open the window and shout out, "If you throw us up some gum, we'll bring her to the window." And they used to throw the gum up and stand on these posts to talk to her. And we used to lay down under those windows there and listen to what they were saying.
My sisters used to bribe them or me, I'm not quite sure which way you'd put this, but they would say, "We've got an older sister, you give us some gum, we'll get her to come and talk to you," which they did very well out of. And they'd stand on top of the post outside of the doorway and sort of call up to the bedroom window in an effort to make you poke your head out to speak to them. I found them really quite a nice lot. One that I knew was a corporal. Again, his name was Andy. And he used to wait for me at the corner as I was going to and from work and shout out, "See you when you come home." And go onto the sports centre and play tennis because you couldn't go very far away in case the convoy was moved quickly. But he subsequently went off and he was also killed, so that was the end of that.
Those of us who lived here during the war, even the children, knew it wasn't just happening in our street. We had 955 Field Artillery in Rockstone Road, but all over the south of England, thousands of British, Americans, Canadians and French were gathering for something that none of us understood. We only realised later what it was all about.
The security measures were taken pretty early in that we had a special scheme limiting highly restricted material to officers with a code name Bigot only. But as we got nearer D-Day, so security increased. From the Wash to Penzance, the whole of the coastal area was declared a closed area. And about 10 days before D-Day, the whole thing clamped down. Nothing out, only people in who were certified as okay for security. It was very, very well done.
Well, I was a cameraman. My job was to photograph the landing on D-Day. Before then, we'd taken part in a lot of rehearsals for D-Day, a lot of build-up stuff. A lot of it was shown on the screen, so some of it was censored. Some of it was used by the War Office to see how things were going. We photographed a wet landing down here, further down the coast towards Brighton. And eventually, just before D-Day, I was taken down to camp near Waterlooville. And there I met the people I was going over with for the first time, the South Lancashire Regiment. And life in the camp, well, enclosed, of course, and there was police all the way around. You weren't allowed out. Was a bit boring, but luckily we were only there for about a week. We moved out one morning from the wooded camp, straight down to Gosport. And when they saw me taking movies of them, they said, you know, what's all this for? I said, well, the pictures will be eventually shown on the newsreels back home. And he said, will my mother in Wigan see it? I said, yes, sure, she's going to see it. No, they were very happy about this. I think possibly they'd done a lot of very hard training, and this was the first publicity they were getting. These lads from the pit areas of South Lancashire, they'd never been publicised before, and it's absolutely quite a thing for them.
Typical scenes before D-Day as Britain prepares for the attack. Ships and armaments pour into the south of England as forces assemble on the Channel coast. But success, despite all the machines, depends on these men. Never Never before has such a vast armada been assembled. Never before such a huge army and such an invasion. From America, France, Canada, and the United Kingdom, allies with a common purpose. Men armed with the spirit of victory make up the assault troops for the Second Front. Their commanders, Montgomery, Admiral Ramsey, and the Allied Commander-in-Chief, General Dwight D. Eisenhower.
United States troops continue to pour into Great Britain. More troopships have recently arrived, crammed full of doughboys who've undoubtedly come over with the firm intention of stamping out Hitler and all his works.
Well, we were here, and we came down from Oxford, and we were put into billets on the west side of the dock area here, right onto the Hardings, where we actually marched onto our LSTs that would actually put us down into the beaches.
We were at the part of the South Staffordshire Regiment headquarters. We had British troops there, and we had the ATS, the famous ATS. And each evening we could kindly use their NAFI headquarters there.
And then towards the weekend, they used to pull the piano out from the end house and have it in the middle of the road.
Yes.
And everybody used to have a glorious sing-song.
Mrs. Bailey's piano,
That's
wasn't
right,
it?
yeah.
Yes.
I'm surprised it ever stayed in tune, actually, because it used to go in and out of her front door.
And my father put this good luck notice up at our gate. And as the soldiers were waiting to embark from the tanks and the ducks and so on, lots of them signed it. And looking on it, we find lots of funny signatures. There's a Nobby Clark from Cleethorpes. There's a Robert the Binder from Glasgow. And we have some from Winchester, Portsmouth, some from Canada, all over.
Would you like one of these rock cakes? I used to make them like this for the Americans during the war.
That sure takes me back. When I was stationed up in north of England, I remember going into the NAFI and having one of these and knocking it on the counter, damaging the counter, and never the rock cake.
They're not quite as bad as that, those.
Well, as you probably recall, this is the famous deuce and a half, 6x6, which was the real workhorse of the Army. And it was normally known as a squad vehicle. It carried one squad of riflemen or engineer combat troops with a full ammunition load. A motorized unit, a motorized battalion, would have about 127 of them.
127 of these?
One battalion.
Yeah.
And as I recall, the most effective use that I ever put one to was when we relieved Cherbourg, and we loaded it up with some rations from the German mess, and we had bottled beverage.
Was that wine?
Well, you know, wine and all else. And we had that all the way down until we got to Munich.
Which one are you?